Neoconservatism or neoliberalism in Canada has reconstructed the historical block of political forces. That is how the ruling class rules in Canada and the political forces it brings together. It's restructured the balance between Ottawa and the provinces, between different capitalist interests, and it's reconstructed the nature of the political system and pulled it to the right. Canada had a very mildly progressive post-war culture and policy regime. Neoconservatism in Canada completely broke that. Repositioned Canada as one of the leading neoliberal or right-wing governments in the world. It pulled the Liberals to the right, it pulled the NDP to the right, and the Green Party emerging fit within this as well. Harper and the New Conservative Party has attempted to keep pulling and building that bloc, pulling them to the right, doing it in a way so that the natural governing coalition is a centre-right coalition under conservative leadership rather than a right-centre coalition under liberal leadership. He is attempting then to find ways to push that agenda together and build his base is a bit stronger in a number of places. He's done that by spilling over politics of Alberta, which has spilled over a bit into Saskatchewan, and he's building a consistent base there. He's done that vis-a-vis Ontario by the kind of the ministers he has from the old Harris coalition that governed provincially, and I think he's building a new base in British Columbia.
And in Quebec, we're seeing the conservative elements of the Quebec nationalist movement, parts of it, beginning to question the national Quebec project. When you look at what they've done in 2.5 years in government, you couldn't call it centrist, you couldn't call it moderate. The number 3 budgets they've brought forward have driven forward radical corporate tax cuts like we have never seen in Canada, typically like we've never seen anywhere in the capitalist world. We're leading the charge on cutting corporate taxes. That's just a matter of record. Changes to EI, again, a complete dismissal of any kind of return to equity in EI funding, or benefits rather, on program after program. Military spending, we haven't had military spending like this since the Korean War.
I think for the first time, I think for almost 25 years, we're at a phase now where we can legitimately speak about the crisis of neoliberalism. That is, that the financial crisis has such potential to spill over into deeper economic recession and shift geopolitical balances of forces, as well as develop into new political fractures inside Canada and the US. The rulers will first attempt to reconstruct neoliberalism, and the balance of forces are such that that project has some possibility. In my view, one would weigh it as the greatest possibility, given that the center-left does not really pose any alternative to neoliberalism. But the financial crisis of this magnitude isn't completely within anybody's control. So the spillover will be fairly strong. The Tories have cut back so much of the fiscal capacity of the Canadian state by its shift in tax policies. So some of the offsets that are possible there are from a reflationary government package are more difficult in Canada. We'll enter a period of a longer-term recession. Now, typically, Canadian recessions are stronger or deeper than American ones, partly because of the impact on commodity prices, which drive so much of the weight of growth, of economic growth in Canada. The other thing is the labor force pressures in Canada, how quickly the labor force grows every year, tends to be greater in Canada than in the US, so that starts spilling over quite quickly into Canada, into higher unemployment rates and higher welfare problems and so on and so forth. I think that will have real impact on the political terrain over the coming period, and it's a question of whether the weight of these forces will break apart the neoliberal bloc that is growing together and will prevent the ruling classes from being able to reconstruct that neoliberal bloc. The polls have been moving a bit, but they've been relatively consistent for the entire period of the election, which spells a minority government with the Conservatives being the lead party. So the initial scenario one would expect coming out of the election is a similar kind of parliament, with the Conservatives attempting to govern with the minority and piecing together supporting votes from any one of the other parties. It's more difficult to envision where that support was going to come from as opposed to the prior election when they were pushing the Liberal Party out. So I think it can't be completely ruled out that we see a different kind of coalitional government form. In a different kind of scenario, something that's not been typical in Canada, where we've always had governments formed based on a single minority government and then being supported in votes by a third party. It seems to me that it can't be ruled out in the current context that there's an attempt at a different coalitional government simply because the Conservatives can't find anybody that's going to support them enough for them to govern. It is a very confused parliament, and in that sense it will replicate the electoral volatility that has been characteristic of Canada. The radical left has not organized itself in a way that can enter into electoral forces or even able to influence electoral forces. Many of them have just slid behind the New Democratic Party and ignored these changes as if you were still simply voting for a Labour Party of the kind that existed in the 1950s and 1960s. This is just simple-minded thinking that really hasn't confronted the changes that have occurred in the political economy of Canada and the ideological shifting of social democracy. It's a very stale argument. This is the New Democratic Party really wants to become the Canadian Democratic Party. They are an electoral machine. They don't engage in campaigns. They don't organize on the basis of class. The social movements fully haven't come to grips with this either. We haven't been very successful for quite a while on winning single issues, even when we carry a majority opinion in the country, such as in the position against the war. Now that says something about our weakness. There's been no spontaneous ruptures of the advanced capitalist states in history, and street politics have to have some linkage to organized politics and organized political structures to be able to challenge the ruling bloc. They've been running from this question of really how to address what kind of left could reemerge that could have not only a better effect in leading political struggles, but eventually have enough power to have some weight in the electoral balance of forces. I think we have to face up to the fact that the labor movement is in an ideological crisis. It is not leading in anything. It is almost absent from this election. Three components at this moment. One is a component that forms among different campaigns a more structured anti-neoliberal alliance. And I don't think there's any way of getting away from the need to create a new political organization of the left that is outside social democracy, carries the political views, ideological positions, the understanding of the need to transform people through education, communication, campaigning in a different way. We quite clearly need to have a new organized left within the union movement, the existing union movement, and building a new union movement in new sectors.